Thank you, Acting Speaker, and today I rise to contribute to the Aged Care Restrictive Practices Substitute Decision Maker Bill 2024. And it probably won't surprise many in the House that aged care is very important to me every day. It gets a bit more important, and just listening to the member for Morwell, I think if I went into an aged care facility, I probably wouldn't be let out. But anyway, I think they'd go for restraint straight away. But anyway, not to worry. I'll stay away from those places. But firstly, I want to thank the Minister for Ageing, Minister Stitt in the other place, and her staff for bringing this bill forward. So I really appreciate that, and it's timely that this bill is brought on today. The bill introduces a structured hierarchy of substitute decision makers in Victoria for restrictive practices in residential aged care, which brings us into alignment with the Commonwealth's Aged Care Act 1997. And of course, the Council of the Aged Care support this bill, and I think that's great. I'm just going to go back to the 80s and 90s and my days as a paramedic and the experience that I had with aged care facilities, but also we heard some terrible stories before the Royal Commission, and my experiences were that all of the things that we're talking about today in regard to restrictive practices occurred, and I witnessed them on many occasions going in and out of aged care facilities. The residents being tied to chairs for most of the day and a meal stuck in front of them, and some of them with their face down in the meal and not even being helped to be fed. Restraints and rails on beds and things like that, and restraining them. And of course, some of this was under the premise of safety of those individuals, or safety of staff, or safety of other residents. And there's no doubt there were some situations where it was about safety. And we've seen a lot of aged care facilities now that are almost like gated facilities because of the safety of the residents, because a number of them do go wandering, and it's really hard. But of course, what is important is that we have enough staff, and of course, the extension of the nurse-patient ratio was really important in regard to having qualified staff in dealing with the clinical and the medical situations of these residents within these facilities. And while COVID was terrible at the time, I suppose one thing that came out of COVID, and that was it continued to highlight the issues in aged care facilities and some of the terrible circumstances that putting our elderly people behind bricks and mortar, and it really highlighted that. And again, I've got to suggest that in aged care, like any health and welfare thing, profit should not become before people. Surely people's welfare is the priority, and profit shouldn't be part of the equation. And as I said, the extension of the nurse-patient ratio in aged care facilities has been very helpful. And I think on a day shift now, I think it's 1 to 7, and a nurse has to be in charge during the day in public aged care. And of course, and it's already been raised, and that is about the staff that work in aged care. It's a really demanding area. And just on that, there was a workforce report, Australian Government workforce report back in 2016, and more than 52% of people living in permanent residential aged care had dementia, and nearly half have depression. So it just goes to show the type of residents that we're talking about and the conditions that they have and how difficult it might be. And we turn the clock back to 1998, 60% of the residents needed high care. But of course, that grew to 83.5% in 2016, and I'd hate to think what it is today. And as I say, those figures come about from the workforce data conducted by the federal government at the time. Of course, this legislation will help protect residents' rights, allowing them to choose trusted individuals to make future decisions, and it ensures aged care providers operate within the Commonwealth's guidelines. And it's clearly about, care, dignity and respect, and that's the fundamental thing, that respect has got to be the key issue in dealing with the residents of aged care facilities. The bill addresses a legislative gap in Victoria that arose after the Commonwealth amended the Aged Care Act in 1997, requiring informed consent from substitute decision makers for the use of restrictive practices when an aged care resident lacks capacity. And of course, those restrictive practices like chemical, environmental, mechanical and physical restraints, as well as seclusion, and should only be used as a last resort. And as I said before, in my experiences in going into aged care facilities, I've seen all of those aspects being used on residents. And as I say, sometimes not for the last resort situation. It's been used as a priority to be able to manage the numbers of people within those facilities, and also the staff will say for their own safety, but it was more about not having enough staff in the facilities, being able to deal with the number of residents and what they had to deal with the complexities of the interactions between the residents. And I know the member for Morwell referred to a story about two gentlemen and the flag down the toilet and all that sort of stuff. You could write a book about some of the stories in aged care facilities about how residents relate to each other in more ways than one, and intimately relate to each other, whether they like it or not. And people wander through the residents at different times, and we've seen serious cases, in regard to those interactions of some of the residents. Of course, the bill introduces 2 new criminal offences, specifically making it a crime for someone to induce through dishonesty, undue influence or threats a substitute decision-maker nomination, knowingly make a false or misleading statement in relation to another person's substitute decision-maker nomination or attempted substitute decision-maker nomination. Of course, these offences ensure that any individual who coerces or forces a decision-maker appointment or fraudulently acts as a substitute decision-maker can be held accountable for their actions and will face the justice system. Of course, restrictive practices in aged care are measures that limit a resident's rights or freedom of movement, intended to manage the behaviours that could pose safety risks. And as I say, historically we've hidden behind the issue of safety as the priority reason for doing some of these things in regard to these restrictive practices. The Commonwealth Aged Care Act 1997 has defined it and categorises these practices into 5 types, and we referred to them previously. Chemical restraint broadly encompasses medications, environmental restraints like locked doors, mechanical restraint like harnesses or bed rails, physical restraint which includes the use of force when necessary, and of course seclusion, which was utilised quite regularly, and all the above were utilised regularly, even up to this day. Of course, under the Aged Care Act, the use of chemical restraint is permitted only when a medical practitioner has prescribed the medication, specifically for this purpose. And informed consent has been obtained from either the aged care recipient or their substitute decision maker, and medical practitioners are required to adhere to all the legal obligations regarding prescriptions in these circumstances. And as I say, previously it was utilised to make it more convenient for the medicos or for the staff or for the aged care facility to be able to manage the residents and the number of residents and the complexities around their issues. Acting Speaker, of course, it'd be remiss not to mention the incredible work of our very own former Commission for Senior Victorians, Gerard Mansour. He had 4 terms over a period of 10 years, and Mr Mansour served as our first Commissioner for Senior Victorians and acted as a vital conduit between the community and the Victorian Government. And of course, his work for senior Victorians and his advocacy against elder abuse is surely something that I am going to appreciate every day for a long time, and I think some of the things that he did obviously have made it a much better place for aged care residents. This bill is really important. I'm pleased it's come on this week. I commend the Minister in regard to bringing this bill forward. This is about the protection of people within residential aged care, and that should be the priority and I commend this bill to the House.